Who are you?
Spent a lot of time, especially this past year, Mark, reflecting on that. I'm at that stage in life where you've done both enough living personally and professionally to really have some great insights. And I think, the best I could come up with is I'm a human being with all the joys and the messiness that is required to be human. And I'm really embracing that. I'm really embracing both the beauty and joy of being human, along with the pain, the messiness, the not so pretty parts, and being grateful for the opportunity to do that.
How did you, I love that you've been thinking about this question. So let's kind of double click a little bit on that. Like, how did you come to that realization, and maybe what did the answer to that question look like? Maybe, years in the past or whatever that time frame is for you.
Yeah, I think I've always been quite reflective, but it didn't quite hit me until for the first time ever in my adult life, I left my day job, which for me, honestly, has been day, night, and weekend jobs, right? There are times in medical training where I worked 120 hours a week. Do not recommend that to anyone. But at baseline, my job has been a big part of who I am. Now, I'm very fortunate and blessed with an incredible family, a partner, my husband, who has, it's been a privilege to go through this journey of life with him. We have two amazing girls, and I have friends and family and definitely a life outside of work. But I didn't realize how much of self-definition was connected to what I did until I left my corporate job in December of 2024, take a year to write Intelligent Health, my book. And I really had to come face to face with what it means to be me. What it means to not have to set the alarm for 5 a.m. And be, running all day. What it means to actually have the luxury of time to sit down and reflect, which was not something that I had had. And so I think really it's been this. While I've always reflected, it's really been this past year where I'd say like it kind of slapped me in the face about, redefining and rethinking or evolving my thinking on who I truly am.
Can you recall any of the kind of core questions that were floating around during that time? And because I think there's a lot of people, different circumstances, of course, and maybe some similar, but a lot of people are going through transition, especially right now. There's a lot of change just in as well as in the job market. So for anyone out there who's about to take that, or make that change, or maybe in that almost like messy middle in a way.
Yeah.
I'm curious to learn what was most helpful now that you're on the other side of that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I found helpful was asking myself, what's the story that I'm telling myself about who I am? And then realizing that it is a story.
Yeah.
It is made up, right? And that does not nearly embody the richness of the human being that gets told by that story, And the story was something around, again, being a physician, being a healthcare executive, being a health tech executive, wanting to create and innovate and make a healthier world. Those were still ultimately all they're good stories. I cherish those stories, and they are stories, and there are layers deeper than that in terms of what makes a person. So I would try and kind of be honest with myself around what's the story I'm trying to tell here.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting in the early days, Mark. I had the opportunity to join two different incredible companies, kind of expanded executive roles than what I'd done before. And so there was a part of me that was like, well, of course. And When I reflected on that, I was like, well, it's because I'm telling myself this story. And here's how this amazing opportunity fits into that story. But is that story really, is it really the totality of who I am, and more importantly, who I want to become? And does it need to evolve?
Hmm.
And I found that to be really powerful.
So who are you becoming?
Oh gosh, I think that is a deeper. I feel like we could spend just the next hour talking about this. I think a far more whole person than I've ever been. I think, I'm a very optimistic, high energy person by nature. And I love that about myself, that I can, in any situation, be able to rally people around me and get them engaged and be able to move towards something that is bigger than any of us. And I think having strengthened that muscle for the entirety of my life, I have ignored parts of me that are part of what makes me a whole human being. And it kind of goes back to the beginning where I said again, there's beauty there, but there's messiness there. There
Sure.
is joy, there's pain. And I think the person that I'm becoming is one who is far more connected and accepting of all. At least that's what I'm striving for.
Yeah, of course. No, but I mean, if we don't give it that thought and set the intentions, then we can almost guarantee we're never going to get to whatever that place is, right? Because
Yeah.
then we fall on that autopilot sequence, and someone else essentially dictates the story of who we're becoming and so forth.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. I'll give you an example of like
yeah.
where this again, I was like, wow, you could really miss out on life if you're always kind of looking on the bright side of things. As I was kind of going along this journey, this is, I don't know, about maybe 4 years ago now, because it's definitely been an evolution to kind of get to this point. Um, I picked up my daughter, who was then in elementary school. I picked her up from school, and it was Valentine's Day, and she was incredibly upset, only in a way that, a 9-year-old could be upset.
Yes.
And
I have one of those right now, so I get it.
yes, so
Yeah.
And I asked her what was going on, and she said, for Valentine's Day, they were supposed to get the same thing for every kid in the class in the right number, and then you hand out the same thing to everyone. So everyone got everything. So this kid comes to hand out stuff, and he had like this cool toy that he was handing out to every kid. And when it got to my daughter's turn, he ran out.
Oh
So
no.
he miscounted. And so she ends up being the only one in class who didn't get one. And so she was just, I mean, this is like the worst thing that could have happened. And she's going on and on. And I came to jump in the way I usually do. And we are so incredibly fortunate in that we have so many toys, so many things to play with. Look at how lucky we are to have all the stuff that we have. We have toys that make noise, and toys that are sparkly, and toys that it just like, look at all of this. We're surrounded with lots of really incredible stuff. I even went as far as I was like, problem solving, where I was like, okay, well, let's solve this problem. You wanted something, you didn't get it. How can we get it? Do we, sit and do an online search and see if we could get this little toy? So I was kind of going through all of this stuff. And I stopped myself and just turned to her and I said, gosh, that sounds really painful, because that's what I was trying to avoid, right? Here
Void,
she
yeah.
was expressing this uncomfortable thing to me. And as her, again, optimistic, positive energy mom, I was sweeping in with but wait, the world
Solution
is,
mode.
oh, it's okay. But she was in pain. She didn't want to hear
Yeah.
that the world was wonderful. And then she turned to me, Mark, and she was like, it was really painful. And then she proceeded to express to me how, again, in 9-year-old language, how she felt social exclusion and pain for not getting to be part of this experience with everyone.
Mm.
And as she was talking more and more, she is a very insightful child, I realized, hey, this had nothing to do with the toy.
Yeah.
It had to do everything with that moment where she didn't feel like she was part of this broader experience of humanity in her class. And it didn't matter if we went and got the toy or the fact that she has a bunch of different toys. It's not about the toy. It's about the feeling. And I oftentimes reflect on that, Mark, because again, I think in this journey of becoming whole myself, I'm learning how incredibly valuable it is to sit in those moments, whether it is with oneself or with the people that you love or with society at large, um, around things that are uncomfortable and painful, and reminding ourselves that we can tolerate
Yeah.
this. And in fact, it makes our lives richer and more full rather than taking away from it.
I love that. What a great that's a great story and great lesson and reminder, I think, for all of us as parents, but then just humans in general, where whenever you're in relationship with really anyone, and including ourselves, right? To kind of just take a pause. And I'm curious, like just in that moment though, like what do you think gave you the pause to kind of stop going down the track that you were going down and be like, well, wait a second, like this is painful. Did something kind of like catch your attention to do that?
Yeah, I think it was this practice that I had started around when you're feeling uncomfortable, listen to that as trying to teach you something,
Mm,
as opposed to try to manage out of it.
yeah,
And I felt like I was uncomfortable because again, here's my child in discomfort.
yeah,
It's interesting because in my professional life, I have had the privilege of being part of a number of people's lives, especially towards the end of their life and as they were transitioning. And I did very much find that the best thing that you can do, I mean, you're not managing stuff out of that situation, but there's such power to sitting next to someone, to holding their hand, to crying with them. Again, I think somehow there was a part of me that knew the richness that came out of that in the work that I did professionally, but but personally, it was very different.
yeah, yeah. But this is mental fitness in real time. I mean, this is you have the practice, you're working on the practice, and then almost intuitively, like that's where it shows up, right? Like this is one of these are one of those moments, which I imagine probably aren't much different from all of the years of medical training where like you're going through the training so that when you're in real time situations, you can ask the right questions, make the right decisions and so forth, or gather more data, whatever you need. But I feel like just in the world that we live in today, it's so easy to not do that. And then like we're just trying to figure things out in such like a dumpster fire scenario. It's like you're trying to push through and try to decipher what's going on, but without any of that preventative training when it comes to the mind or anything, frankly, right? That's where
Yeah,
it becomes
yeah, you're
challenging.
absolutely right. I will say though, my medical training and again, I don't know if this is a generational thing. I'm hoping that, in the 20 plus years since I did medical training, that things have evolved. But definitely for my generation, again, I'd say in the US, because I don't know if other countries train differently. It was part of survival to disconnect your emotions from what one perceived as their well-being.
Mm,
Meaning, you'd go give someone a terminal diagnosis, they're going to die from their cancer. You'd come out and laugh and joke with colleagues.
yeah, yeah.
And you'd go in, someone would stop breathing or their heart would stop, you revive them, you go out to dinner. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think there was no space for you to actually take a beat and say, this is actually really hard. As a
Yeah.
human being, my heart reaches out to someone who just got a diagnosis of a terminal diagnosis, or my heart goes out to the fact that someone literally died and we had to bring them back and
Hmm.
they're is going to be really long and slow. And I think, it is an intentional practice for us to learn how to acknowledge those different parts in everything that we do. I heard this from a friend of mine in finance, where they were doing something, they lost a large sum of money in investing. I mean, it's all legal, but they lost. They were investing. They made some wrong bets. They lost a bunch of money for a large number of people. And I asked him, I said, do you feel bad about that? He's like, well, it definitely doesn't help our performance
Yeah, yeah,
portfolio. Like, yeah, but there are humans who are counting on
yeah,
this. Like, do we teach that you feel that you
yeah,
connect these pieces between who we are and how we move through the world and the impact that we have on others. And I think one can do that. And again, I'd argue to say that it is a tremendous sense. I'm sorry, it's a tremendous source of strength and a much fuller life than kind
sure.
of moving through things and thinking that we could have firewalls. Like there is no biological firewall.
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess what's the balance, right? Because I see this too. I have family members and close friends in like law enforcement and firefighting and so forth, where them as well. They see horrific things and almost kind of disassociate. But it's like, I imagine there's some kind of balance there of because you can only hold so much space for those
Yeah,
scenarios. But like, what's the balance of not holding anything to being human to your point,
yeah,
right? And like feeling real emotions but not letting them kind of like clog up your operating system and
yeah.
hijack your nervous system and all of that, right? It's
To not be overwhelmed and
yeah,
incapacitated by it so that you can wake up the next day and do it all over again. I mean, I think there are robust techniques in how you can deal with day in, day out trauma. Again, you're on a police force, you're a firefighter, you're a doctor, in whatever you're doing in these high stress situations. I do think that there are better ways in how one can handle and process in a timely way that where things
hmm,
don't build up and you don't become incapacitated. I just think we don't teach them. I
yeah,
think, we don't integrate this in our education. Our education is focused on the content that needs to be passed on for you
sure,
to do the job properly, not considering that there is a human doing this job and that there are going to be consequences to this. I was reading a book around how generative AI models get trained, and this was apparently very similar to how social media models got trained, where to be able to provide the right training data, there is a whole workforce of people, unfortunately, many in the global south, where they have to watch horrific content in terms of kind of the worst that humanity can do to each other. And they have to code these so that then the algorithms can learn from this. One can say, well, that is a job and someone signed up to do that job for whatever reason, probably didn't have a better option for employment.
yeah,
And
because those aren't high paying jobs either from my
they're not high paid.
understanding.
Yes. We know that watching that kind of horrific content day in, day out does have emotional impact and the human. There are companies that provide robust psychosocial support and provide outlets for people to be able to talk through and understand what they're seeing, helping them process it, helping them build resiliency in light of these things. And so again, I think there is a science and there are practices that can help, but
Hmm.
you have to integrate them. You have to consider this important enough to integrate it into the limited
Yeah,
educational time that you have.
yeah. I feel like this is, I mean, you let me know if there's a link here, but I feel like this is probably a good place to kind of dovetail into intelligent health and all of your work. And just from the perspective of, like, I think if the foundation if our foundation is, let's just say, call it a pillar of health in general, I mean, if you're focusing on the fundamentals, if you're generally healthy and so forth, I think we just give ourselves a bit of a leg up in all of these kind of scenarios, right? And then, of course, everything else, and we can jump into those other topics. But, if we're not doing well and we're already, max stress and our nutrition is way off and, we have a bunch of health concerns, it just becomes exponential in terms of when you're faced with hard decisions or faced with like what we're talking about right now, challenging situations where emotional regulation and holding those emotions are challenging for anyone. And then you layer in the fact that most of the population is not healthy. I think we need to start there, right? Or
Yeah.
there's no downside to starting there. So, I mean, maybe I said a lot there, but maybe just, I know it's the book title, but I mean, it's the topic of your work. And I love how I just like the language of intelligent health. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, the connection to our conversation is that you ultimately need the context of who the human is and what is the world that they reside in. I share in the book the story of Elena, who I had the privilege of caring for. She was in her 30s, had been in the hospital multiple times with uncontrolled blood sugars. She had diabetes. And I was seeing her in a follow-up to make sure that she knew the medications she was supposed to take. She was going to do her visit with her specialist, with her endocrinologist, that she knew that she was supposed to be physically active and have a good diet. And I knew the script really well. I provided her all the answers.
Hmm.
And yet she was really disengaged the whole time I was talking. And I thought, as we had written in her medical chart multiple times, she's a non-compliant patient. Here's someone who just doesn't care about her health. And I remember I was about to leave the room when I paused for just a beat. And I turned to her and I said, "Hey, how do you feel about this plan?" And it was the first time, Mark, she looked up at me and she proceeded to tell me in a quiet voice that she had lost her job a number of months prior. With that, she had lost her health insurance. With that, she had lost the lease on the little apartment that she was renting, and she was living in her car. So the medications that I was recommending, some of which needed refrigeration, like that was just not
Yeah.
going to work out for her. Buying chicken and fish, that was not going to happen. She did not park her car in a safe place where she could have the physical activity that was required. And it's that lived context
Mm.
that makes all the difference. And so the premise of intelligent health is really threefold. The first one is we have to unify the data that makes up our digital self. 20% of what determines our health comes from traditional healthcare. It's 10 to 20%. 80 to 90% of what determines our health comes from the air we breathe, the food we eat, the stress we carry, our habits, our genetics. We are making decisions about people's life and death on that 10 to 20%. Like you would
Mm.
never make any other key
Yeah.
decision with 10 to 20% of the information. So it's time to unify that data, and we can technologically do that now. We then apply intelligence to that. So you get insights onto what is going on with the person today, what can get foresights about what can happen to them in the future so that we can have prevention. And then the last pillar of this is it has to be consumer owned and consumer driven. This has to belong to us. It cannot belong to all these silos. This is not a healthcare delivery mandate. It is not an insurance or payer mandate. It's not a pharma mandate. They will continue to exist and have their own data, but the totality of data needs to be owned and driven by us, focused on our personalized goals, leveraging the evidence that's out there for better
Yeah.
health and care. So that's kind of the three pillars of intelligent health.
Mm. So, I mean, for someone like the individual, I assume maybe the logical kind of first step is to take inventory of the whole system in a way.
Yeah.
Like right? Like your environment, like you said, all these factors. Like how do you suggest people get started? And then of course I want to, get into longevity and the other big thing, and we talked about this during our first conversation, and I see it come up over and over again, is just all the technology and the
Yeah.
tracking and the kind of the trade-offs of that. First, like someone on the making assumptions here, but just knowing a little bit about the audience on this show or listening to the show, people are pretty motivated. They're here,
Mm.
because they do want to improve and they've tried things and tested and so forth. So speaking to that audience that maybe they're not at a place they want to be, or they just they are curious to see like how can I maximize my health and longevity and thrive and also participate in what's available to us, but not to my detriment, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's really interesting. It's quite a noisy market right
Hmm.
now in terms of all the options that are available to us and, all the different things that our friends and acquaintances are doing that we are not. And we feel like, it's if we don't get to do these things, we are not going to get to be our healthiest self. And as
Hmm.
responsible people and again people of choice where we actually have the option to look at what's available, I think it can be quite overwhelming to try and navigate that market.
Yeah.
I think at the same time people have realized that they're not getting what they want from traditional healthcare. They are not
Mhm.
getting better health when they are sick. They are getting cared for, but there is not as robust an understanding and set of solutions for I want to live my healthiest self. I want to live as long as possible. And
Do you
so,
see do you see people rushing then into, because I almost like,
oh,
"Oh,
for
wait, you're not
sure.
tracking your sleep or everyone's taking creatine. I guess I should do," right? It's
Yeah,
I don't.
for sure. And it's really interesting to me that there's kind of two thoughts I have on this. I just wrote a piece around this with the wearables, like the amount of stuff people are tracking. And I'm a big data person, so I love data. And I was an early adopter for all of the technologies, and I've done all the different things within reason where I was like, well, I want to know, I want to get the data. I want to know what this is. But I'm finding that people are developing a disconnect between what the data is telling them and how they are feeling. The challenge with the data is, and this is why, again, I talk about for intelligent health, you have to unify all the data. You are not just your sleep. You are not just your
Mhm.
activity level. You are not just what you eat. You are a combination of a whole host of things. And so your data could be telling you something, but how you feel is different. So I had a friend who was like, I woke up, my, wearable, I won't name names, but my wearable told me I didn't sleep well last night and I should take it easy today. But I really feel like I want to go for a run. Like, do I
Yeah.
go for a run? Do I not? And I'm like, gosh, preserve your decision-making ability.
Yeah, yeah.
The data when and where is helpful, but you go based on how you feel. And it's important for us to not lose sight of and get so quantitative about things that we forget that, you should be feeling good. Or I love it, like, because I go to a lot of longevity meetings and there's always people have all these practices. And someone was telling me, they're like, I make this shake. It's amazing. It has they were listing like the 15 things that the shake has. It is so great. It tastes like crap, but I just know I wake up in the morning and just drink it and then I'm good for the rest of the day. And there's a part of me that's like, what is the psychosocial toll of being like, this thing is horrible, but I'm making myself do it
Mhm.
every single day? You know, I'll stop at this story because I could keep going with these stories, but I was facilitating a longevity meeting with a group of people from lots of different backgrounds, highly accomplished, incredibly intelligent people. And I was just facilitating it just so that we get to have a good conversation. And about half an hour in, when everyone's like talking about, well, I did this and I went to this clinic and I did this and, people went abroad and did something else and people are taking notes and comparing things. And I could just feel the tension in the room rising, Mark. And I was like, as the facilitator, I just want to pause this 1 second.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sensing a ton of anxiety in this room around what you're not doing and what you should be doing. And while I can't tell you the mechanism by which some of this stuff is supposed to make you feel better and live longer, I can tell you stress and anxiety does not make you live longer and feel better. And so in all of this, like we can't forget that if you're constantly stressed and activated and have higher cortisol levels, that's going to lead to your issues with immune system, with
Hmm.
processing blood sugar. Like that is definitely not the path to go. So there is absolutely a ton of frenzy in the market
Yeah.
around what are people doing and what do I need to, what am I not doing that I need to be doing?
Yeah, yeah. There's a bunch of FOMO in a lot of this.
For sure.
I wonder, have you ever experimented with this? And this is something that I've been trying personally that, at least for me, has been helpful, but almost like looking at, especially when it comes to the tracking side of things, but almost doing things in seasons. Like
Mm.
I had a Whoop for a while. It was very, I mean, I still have it. I'm just not wearing it right now. It was very informative. And then kind of similar examples of what you mentioned. And the same thing that happens on Apple Sleep and Auras and all that stuff. It's not exclusive to them. But like I think of Whoop and I think of having been on a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, a few times as well, just for, a week or two. Tremendous amount of insight
Yeah.
and data that I still I still think about when I make food decisions in order
Yeah.
of eating and so forth, but don't have like that constant stress of like scanning my
Course.
arm or checking my sleep scores, right? And maybe I'll go back on, if I've changed something. But yeah, have you ever experimented like almost like a seasonal approach in a way? Maybe that's not the right language, but kind of
Yeah,
best
Mark.
of both worlds.
Yeah, I actually think that's the right way to use these technologies, which is unless you're like training for something. I've had
Yeah,
friends
of
who are like
course.
training for marathons and doing things like that. And I think that's different. But I think for day to day life, the way to do it is you use it for a certain period of time, you get insights that you integrate into your life, and then you move forward and you live your life. Again, to
Mm,
me, the continual tracking is I have not seen people do that in a way. And again, they're tracking on one thing. And I'm always like, okay, so now like you're now over indexing on this, that you are far more than this. But I actually got a continuous glucose monitor, which I can't wait the reason I wanted to do it was kind of to your point, again, as one goes through the stages of life, your metabolism changes
hmm.
and there is based on your genetics, there is an order to how you consume things that can make a difference on your blood sugar levels. Now,
Yeah.
you know, do I want to constantly be doing that? No, but is it helpful to have best practices? So most days I'm actually following that. Absolutely. I think same with sleep and activity. Again, even as a massively data driven person and someone who strongly believes in the power of data, um, I think we have to have a balance here. And it always reminds me of like I love those human pieces. I'm seeing them more and more now. I think there was just one on Wall Street Journal about like someone who lived to be 110 and they are not following their
No.
biometrics on Whoop and Aura. They're
Yeah.
like, they're people who are staying active, who have
Yeah.
community, who have a sense of purpose, even at 110, who,
Yeah.
they are doing the basics, which is, eat well, eat diversely, that has a bunch of benefits for your
Hmm.
microbiome and beyond. Sleep enough hours. And I hate like when people give numbers because at times in life I've gotten 5 hours of sleep and I felt really refreshed. And at other times I've needed 10 to feel refreshed. I'm like, figure out what refreshed means for you when you wake up in the
Yeah.
morning. And be active and find continual activity outside of what you do for your cardiovascular wellness and for building muscle. Just find constant activity. I don't understand people do this incredible exercise and then the whole day they're not doing anything. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
actually much better if you're getting up and constantly, building movement into your day, even with our virtual worlds. It's much better to do that than to be sitting all day and then just having, this period of
Totally.
activity. And have community, have
Yeah.
connections, have a sense of purpose. I think again, those are really key things. It was funny on the topic of FOMO. I was at a longevity meeting and there was a concierge doctor who was saying he had a patient who was very interested in doing peptides, and the physician was very concerned because he was like, "I'm putting something inside your body. Like, what is this?" And it's like, "It's peptides. It says on there what it is." And the physician said, "Do you mind if I send this to lab and have it analyzed? Because again, I just feel responsible if I'm putting something in your body to do that." So they send it to lab and they get the lab report back. And sure enough, there were some amino acids in there,
Hmm.
but there was also LSD
Oh,
and arsenic
yeah.
and like a whole bunch of other stuff. And the doctor was like, "Listen, you don't know what people are putting in this. Like, of course, people are feeling better after they get this injected. They're high,
Yeah.
and it has arsenic. Like, you'd never inject yourself with some of this stuff." And I think, in that enthusiasm to make sure we're not missing out on stuff, people are doing things that are actually harmful.
Well, I feel like if I think of some of the through line of what we've been speaking about is there's there's like a combination of like, let's not forget about the fundamentals first and
Yes, for
foremost,
sure.
right? And also let's not forget about that many of us, if we give ourselves the opportunity to check in with ourselves, can get a lot of good data
Yeah.
around just like, how am I feeling? And am I sleepy when I want to be sleepy? Am I alert when I want to be alert? Like things like that. And then yeah, of course, like you could experiment and be curious and leverage some of the technology. But even with that, like, be smart about it and have people around you that you can ask questions, be curious and so forth. And like, are you doing it for the right reasons, I guess?
Yeah.
Right? Of course, we all want to live longer and thrive in those extra years, but there are many ways to do so. And just like, again, slow down a little bit, not just rush into all of the latest and greatest, and do, a proper assessment or educate yourself first, right? I'm curious. I
Agree.
had a question, or maybe this links to what we're speaking about, but just around your book and like, what's something in your book and your work that many people resist, but like really need to hear? Is there anything that
Yeah.
that surfaces?
Yeah, I think this is less about people resisting and more about us not knowing that there could be a better future.
Mm,
But I think, one of the key parts of the book talks about how we have accepted that our health and care decisions will be made based on this 20% of the data that's there on us from a healthcare clinic, hospital delivery standpoint. And the fact that you would never get on a plane if the pilot came on and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us. I want to let you know I only have 20% of the data that will get us to our destination safely."
yeah,
You would never do that.
yeah,
You would not put your life in the hands of someone who had such a limited viewpoint on you. And yet we do that in healthcare. What I think people are not realizing, and it's honestly getting worse because of all these wearables and apps that we have, which I love. And I love
hmm
that we have this ecosystem. And we are getting further and further broken up into these slivers
yeah,
of us versus having, again, a holistic view on who we are. The technology actually exists today, Mark, to bring together that 20% with that 80% that has the wearables and the apps. And our genetic data and our where we live, the air we breathe. We have the ability to bring it together, and there are companies and organizations that are looking to build that. So I want people to be cognizant of that. That as hard as we try, and we think we are being good stewards of our health by tracking and doing all of the active biomarkers and the testing. I mean, I've done the 150 blood test values and the whole body MRI and all of that. It makes sense when it all pulls together, especially as you're looking at how do I get to live my healthiest life. You can see trends and you can understand the root cause of health and illness if you can see the entirety of that data. And
Okay.
so we are getting there. And I think as consumers, we have to be aware of that and embrace that type of technology versus, again, the current market that is frankly not set up for our health. It's set up for the benefit of the developers. Bless them. I'm glad, because they're creating tools that help us. But ultimately, what helps us is bringing all of this data together.
So just kind of says some final thoughts for everyone listening. Like where do you begin? I mean, is it getting a good baseline of your overall health with some of the testing that's out there? And in what I hear often, especially in the longevity work, it's like you have all this information, and it's like, what do I do now, right?
Yeah.
And it's like almost data overwhelm in a way. It's like, and you have a family physician, there are integrative medicine docs, there are specialists, like it seems like there's so much, but at the same time, it's confusing, and then people get stuck and they don't do anything, or they go extreme on some of the peptide examples, or there's a million others that we could bring up. But so how do you, yeah, like, is there any kind of counsel on people in those positions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, having robust baseline data on yourself, again, whether the biometrics that we talked about or broader panels of tests, all of that is invaluable. You then need to find the right practitioner who has the experience, who can sit with you and pull that together and interpret that with you. Some of that
Yeah.
could definitely be done leveraging generative AI models, and a number of them now give you the ability to connect your electronic health record along with everything else and have it pull that together. My concern with those, and I talk in the book about trust, is you do have to be thoughtful about who has your health data and how it could be
Hmm.
leveraged. I think, I'm never very trusting when people want my data because they want to make money off of it versus they want my data because they're there to help me. But I do think that there are ways, again, to kind of leverage some generative AI tools to be able to do some of that synthesis. But ultimately, again, you need, whether it is in traditional healthcare, it's phenomenal functional medicine doctors, phenomenal integrative medicine doctors. Again, people who can sit down with you and really kind of interpret and work through what are the things that you need to do. I will say again, though, Mark, I will go back to your point around the basics. All of this is great, but if you're not doing the basics, if you're not sleeping, if you're not
Yeah.
exercising, if you're not eating, if you're not creating time for community, if you're doing something that you hate for 12 hours a day versus having a sense of purpose, again, those are nothing is going to, no amount of peptide is going to replace
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. So
Well,
one
because
has
the
to
the
do,
foundation is rocky.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do think the good thing is that, and part of why, again, I took the year in 2025 to write the book is I was looking at the tech landscape and I was like, these tools are going to become available for us, the consumer. So the ability to pull together all of this data and leverage evidence-based practices where there's evidence, and then real world evidence, meaning now you're pulling lots of people together. You may not have data on a particular thing, like, do I take turmeric or do I eat blueberries, or, do I walk 10,000 miles or 15,000 miles? You can start now generating evidence from the lived experience of people to say for you, with your genetics, with your past medical history, with your lived context, this is the personalized solution for you. That actually, I think, is far closer than we think, and in some ways, far superior. Um, the experience of one provider telling you what to do, because you're now looking into the real world, into what this looks like for people kind of going through life. So I'm
Hmm.
really excited about what's right around the corner for us, and
Yes.
yeah, maybe we could continue to have this conversation, because it's going to look very different, every six
Yeah.
months or so.
But I love that. It's a great place, I think, to end it with some, hope and optimism, and not that I don't think that this wasn't a pessimistic conversation. I think it was a let's be cautious on what we're doing and also give ourselves the autonomy and empower ourselves to put our health first. And there's a lot of different things that we could do. And first and foremost, the foundations, of course, like just do that. I think the health of our planet or
Yeah.
the humans on our planet will completely change. And then you have all these other beautiful, tools and tests and modalities and so forth that you can tap into. It's exciting. We have to slow down though and not get like, again, fall onto autopilot and just chase the sexy kind of marketing headlines of things and all of that. And that's what I mean, I for one, I'm grateful you took that time to write Health Intelligence, because that's a beautiful guidebook and a beautiful, at least, place to start. And again, just keeping the topic of our health and how to approach it and the questions maybe to ask and where to be curious and so forth. So thank you for coming on the show, but also a bigger thank you for taking the time and the energy it also requires to continue to get the word out and help educate and so forth.
Well, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation.